Hello, and welcome to the Mommy Escape Time podcast. I'm Lauren. I'm a wife and a new mom. I came up with the idea of this podcast after struggling to find mommy groups around me when my son was born. I wanted a community of mothers I heard so many of my friends talk about when they had their children. This podcast is to help mothers like me that want a community of mothers to connect with when they have their free time. Together with my usual guest, Taryn, and other mothers, we will share our experiences, not our advice, through motherhood, and hopefully get some tips from you, the listeners. So come join us on the Mommy Escape Time podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Mommy Escape Time podcast. I am Lauren, your host, as always, and I'm here with Taryn.
Hi.
And today we are going to talk all about my birthing story. I guess that's how people call it.
Yeah.
And
sure.
so that, and we do want to talk about one tiny thing about when I was pregnant that I did leave off.
Yeah, this was my favorite part of your pregnancy.
So when I was sick in the beginning, one of the few things besides an apple that I could keep down was a chocolate glazed donut from Dunkin' Donuts. And I don't normally go to Dunkin' Donuts, and I would go every single day.
Every day.
Yes. And I would come in with these 2 chocolate glazed donuts that throughout the course of the day, I would eat my apple and these 2 chocolate glazed donuts. Mm-hmm. So eventually it stopped. But yeah, I would say.
But it was fun road trips. We would go during our prep period. We'd be like, we're planning.
Yeah, obviously. So yeah, that was part of life. So we'll move on to my birth.
Yeah. So you were out of work at 35 weeks and you were home sleeping all the time.
Yes, I was. I took a bath every single day. We're very lucky. We have a jacuzzi tub in our bathroom. So I would do that every single day. And I thought I would miss work. I did not miss work for one second. It was the most glorious time of my life. I was also nervously trying to knit my son's baby blanket because I was like, he's coming. I need to get this done. And I did finish before he got here, but
I was watching Dexter. When I was on bed rest, I was not knitting, so good for you.
I was listening to lots of podcasts. That's what I did, and I got into YouTube. I figured out that there are things to watch on YouTube. So, yep, I figured out life pretty much at that point. Like everyone else, I came into the 21st century, as my husband will say. But the big thing about birth with me is I did not know a lot about birth. I thought I knew a lot about birth before I was pregnant, but I knew the basic idea. I knew 10 centimeters push, right, that you could, have a C-section and all that stuff.
Now, did you have a birth plan going into it?
I did have a birth plan, and I had, we'll say, a high maintenance one. So my husband wanted me to have our baby in a hospital, and I did not necessarily need to have a baby in a hospital. I did not need to have it at home, but I would have been fine at a birthing center. I would have been fine with that. Unfortunately, there's not a birthing center close enough to me to make it any different than going to a hospital. So that was a whole thing. And I have a need to not take medicine. I just don't like to take medicine. I feel like there's a root problem, and so I want to solve the root problem and not
mask it
and not take medicine. I mean, obviously some medications are humanly necessary to stay alive, and I do understand that because I had to go for all those IVs and I had to take medicine to keep my baby alive and keep myself alive while I was pregnant. So I do understand it. But I think because I had taken the medicine when I was nauseous and throwing up, that I was like, I can't put anything else in my body. And my doctor had said very early on, you need to be prepared that you are not going to be a person that can take an epidural. And she goes, I don't mean that you won't be able to physically have one. She's like, I don't see you sitting to take the needle. She's like, I don't see you signing a piece of paper that when I tell you the risks, that you are going to do them.
No, thank you.
So one of my friends at the time had just had experienced right before me going into labor, was that she had gotten an epidural, and afterwards she had these horrible, horrible headaches. And
yes.
They had to do something where they tapped fluid.
They had to do a spinal block or something, right?
Yes, and
yeah.
they had to like do all these things where they had to put all this extra stuff in her spine afterwards. And all I kept thinking is, how can anything be wrong with the mom and you be taking care of a child? Like
a newborn.
Right. I was like, I can't have that. So I was like, all right. I'm like, I'm going to try it without the epidural and see how it goes.
Yeah.
And that was my plan from pretty much day one. Because, I mean, in my doctor practice, there were 3 doctors, and all 3 doctors said every time they met me, they said the same thing. They're like, you should be prepared for not getting the epidural, because they're like, as much as you say you can handle, the needles and things like that, they're like, and you've been pricked, so many times. They're like, they're like, you don't seem like that type of a person. They're like, it's fine. And I was like, okay. So then I really started to like study about birth, and I got really focused in on the Bradley method. And I never took the specific classes, but I got the book,
right.
And I learned a lot about, I know a lot about labor. I know a lot. I read that book maybe 5 or 6 times. I highlighted it. My husband and I read it together. So I knew a lot about birthing and the different stages. And the biggest thing that I learned was, my placenta was in the front, which meant that I was going to have back labor. It wasn't like, maybe you'll have back labor. No. It was, you will have back labor. If your placenta's in the front, you're going to have back labor. So I knew I was going to have an extra source of pain.
Right.
And I also knew that I didn't want my water to break early on, because the earlier you don't have that cushion to then have the contractions not be so bad in the front.
Yes.
So those were the 2 big things that I was like, okay, well, I already know that this is going to happen. So I'm like, if I can prevent my water from breaking, because that's a thing, then I'll be fine.
Good thought.
So I learned, and my biggest thing is when you get to between 7 and 10 centimeters, that's the worst. That's called transition. It's the worst part of it, but it's also like typically an hour and a half of your labor. So, and I knew that. So I was like, okay. I'm like, I'm sure. And everyone says, when you get to transition if you don't have an epidural. So I was like, okay. So I'm like, I'll know, and that's fine. I'm like, I'll figure it out. Something I should have said back in my pregnancy thing is I had Braxton Hicks at like 20 weeks.
Yeah.
So, I just always had contractions, because even though I didn't have to go to get IVs all the time, again, there was no way that they could hydrate me back to a regular amount without there being other complications. So I knew I was going to have that on and off all the time. So I kind of knew like what early onset contractions would be like. So in my studies, I also learned about this really weird suggestion that people give you at 9 months. So your last month of pregnancy, you are supposed to eat 6 dates a day.
Yes.
And I did that. And the reason is that it's supposed to open up your cervix, and
now
it's
tell
supposed
me, how much do you like dates?
I hate dates. And so I would eat 3 in the morning and 3 in the evening. And I don't think it didn't matter what kind of dates you were eating. Sometimes I ate like 2 Lara bars in a day. It didn't really matter. Like, I tried not to go nuts about it. And there were 2 things. They said your cervix would open, so you would dilate faster, and your labor would go faster. Now, there's no way to test whether or not your labor is going to go faster or not, because it's not like there's another one of you that is not taking dates.
With the same exact variables, creating the same exact situation.
So I don't really know. And all the research that I read about it was a lot of it was people on their second child. that their first child, they had a long labor. And then the second one, they took these dates and it was shorter. So I was like, well, whatever. I'm like, the worst thing that happens is I have all this sugar in my body. I'm like, but dates are supposed to be, they're not bad for you.
At least there's fiber along with it.
Right. So I was like, it's not the worst thing in the world. So I was like, whatever, I will try it. So I used to have to go to Whole Foods every week, and they knew me, and they knew what day I came because they would have the dates came in like this container, so they would have them all set for me. So yes, that happened all the time. The ones I had they had a pit in them, so I had to kind of eat around the pit.
I love dates.
Yes. And I am the only person that ever had heard about this date thing. I'd never heard of anyone, but I don't think I had known anyone but you who had gone that long without an epidural either.
Yeah.
So, and that was my other thing. I was like, Taryn did it for like 20 hours without an epidural. So I'm like,
no problem.
I have to get to at least 20 hours before I consider getting an epidural. And of course, my biggest stupid fear was, oh my gosh, what if I have to have a C-section? And that was like a big fear of mine that what if I have to have a C-section? I don't want a C-section. Like,
then you're required to get an epidural. You have no choice.
And I was like, what are we going to do? And I kept like, I didn't like question my doctors, but there were 3 doctors in the practice. And 2 of them were like nice and sweet. And then there was one who was like not. And I was like, I need her. I'm like, because I need like a no nonsense, like this is what we're doing. This is what's happening.
No wishy-washy.
Right. Because these other 2, I'm like, I'm going to tell you, nope, I'm not going in for a C-section. No, we're going to wait. Nope, I don't trust you. No, we're not doing it. So, and it's not that I don't believe in their professional opinion. It's just I knew that I'd be able to bulldoze them into waiting longer. And I was like, I have to think about my child. And I was like, I really want this other woman to be my doctor. Spoiler alert, she was by pure luck. So I'm in my, 36 weeks and everyone's like, oh, you're going to go early. You're going to go early. You're going to go early.
Sorry, I'm laughing because I know the end of the story.
Right. And I don't go early. And I was fine with not going early. It wasn't like I was like, oh, I just need this to be done. I need this to be done. I was like living it up. I was like, I'm not working. I'm home. I get to rest. I watched so much TV. It was like amazing.
It's glorious.
It was so nice. And I could get stuff done because I could go out during the day. Even though I really didn't go out, I hardly left my house. I still walked. I didn't walk as far. My husband with my husband, I could walk further, but when I was home alone, he did not want me walking, to also because I needed to go to the bathroom, so that was a thing too. So, I remember they had given us 2 dates. They had given us May 1st and April 29th. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, we're not going to, they started off with May 1st and then they said, it's really going to be April 29th. And they were like, we're not going to change it because it's within a week of your first due date.
Right.
They're like, so whatever.
That time is negligible at that point.
Right. Yeah. So we don't care. So I remember being like, I remember someone saying, if you get tired near the end, you have to rest because you don't know. Is that meaning your body's telling you you're getting ready for labor?
Right.
So you need to rest because tomorrow you won't be sleeping because you'll be in labor. So I really took that to heart. And so anytime I felt a little tired, I was like, I'm going to go lay down. I'm done with everything. And I had made sure that first week that I was off from work that I had gotten everything done that I needed to get done. Yeah. And that was it. I just wasn't doing anything anymore. So I remember my husband on April 28th, he's like, come on, we're going for a walk. It was a really nice day. Mm-hmm. It was like one of our really first nice days in April. And we went for a walk and every single one of my neighbors was outside their house.
Oh my gosh.
And they're all like, hello, when are you due? And that's when I was like, oh, this is why I don't go to work because this is the stuff that bothers me right now.
They're so annoying.
Skyrockets my blood pressure. So, because one of my other fears was that I was going to get induced and I didn't want to be induced. I was just really trying to do it without any assistance. Mm-hmm. I just wanted everything natural to the point where I could be safe. So we went we went for the walk, and I even had a neighbor come by. She has a yoga studio, and she's like, if you want to come, if the baby's not coming out, we could try these yoga poses and stuff like that. And I was like, okay. I'm like, whatever I need to keep on the back burner for next week. I'm like, I will. So whatever. I never even thought that day was April 28th because I stopped caring about the dates, and I just didn't want to be focused on what day it was and anything like that. So that night I go to sleep, not thinking anything of it. And at 2 a.m. I woke up and I was having contractions. And I knew at that, I woke up and I was like, okay, well, let me see how it's going. And I started timing them. And I had a contraction thing on my phone, and it's still going actually as of right now.
A contraction timer?
Yes. So my last contraction was 8,335 hours ago and 4 minutes. Oh, now 5 minutes. That was the last time I used it. So I did have a contraction app on my phone, and it was on my first page. And I remember thinking okay, I'll just keep track of them and see how it goes. And mine were, they were 4 minutes apart. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh my gosh. And they were already a minute. And I was like, okay, my goal is to wait until they're 3 minutes apart and about 90 seconds long.
Yeah.
That was my goal. So my husband was actually sleeping in the other room. So I actually, in case I went into labor, so that I was if I wanted him to sleep no matter what, because I wanted him to be resting.
Someone to be well rested.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was just, I was in bed for a while, and then around 4 a.m. I couldn't lay down anymore. So then I started pacing, and I was watching TV, and I was just pacing, and then doing my contraction.
Which, by the way, you have to give yourself credit for, because I don't know many women who are like, I'm going to let my husband sleep. Most of my friends were like, he was up and he was timing, because if I'm going to be miserable, so is he.
I know. I don't have... Because I didn't know how long the labor was, and we weren't going, our plan was not to have a typical labor. So he was my coach during the labor. Uh-huh. So I needed someone to be of sound mind. And I said I didn't want to have to do anything on the phone. I didn't want to have to call anyone, including my own mom, about that we were going to the hospital. Because my mom was staying nearby, waiting to meet us at the hospital that day. So I did that, and I would say, so around 5 o'clock, I was like, okay, it's going to be today, at least that we're going to the hospital. I'm like, right. So I should think about packing my hospital bag. Now, for a super planner, you're like, what the heck? I have no idea. I just kept being like, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. And I guess I had a few things already in there, but all I wanted to pack was my robe and a change of clothes and my toiletry bag and my glasses. Actually, I was wearing my glasses because I couldn't wear my contacts the day that I was in labor. Mm-hmm. So that's it. So I was like, okay, fine. Well, I just threw all that in there. So I'm packed. And then I was like, I have to shower because
who knows when I'll get a chance to do that.
And, got to shave my legs. So, so I did that, and it was hard because everyone was like, oh, go in the shower. It'll make you feel so much better.
Lies.
It didn't,
all lies.
It just wasn't something that worked for me. The only thing that worked for me was walking. The only thing that helped was walking. So not being able to walk was the worst thing. And so I started to really freak out about the car ride. And so at this point it was 6:30. And I go in and I wake up my husband, and I was like, today's the day. He's like, oh, okay. He's like, when do you want to go to the hospital? I'm like, I'm going to call the doctor right now. So I called my doctor's office, and of course it's a Sunday. So I was like, oh, so none of my, it's going to be the on-call doctor or whatnot. Right. So I call, and the doctor that is on call is the doctor that I wanted to have. So I was like, perfect. Thank goodness. And she's like, yeah, we're at the hospital whenever you want to come by.
Sure,
I'm picking something up. So it was funny. So I was like, okay, I told my husband, I'm like, okay, sometime between 9 and 11, we're going to go. And I made my husband bring up strawberries because that was the only thing I thought I could eat. So I ate some strawberries because they say, eat before you go to the hospital.
Right. Because once you're there, you're not allowed to eat in case they need to do a C-section.
They do, except in my birth plan, because I was not I was going natural. I said, as long as I can go natural. They said that I could eat like popsicles and things like that. That was the thing that I had asked for. So at 9:00, I told my husband, I was like, okay, we're going to go. Not because I wanted to go. I was trying to go as long as possible.
How were your contractions at that point?
So they were at 3 minutes and they were at least 90 seconds, sometimes 2 minutes. So I was getting a little nervous about how, and we're like 40 minutes away from where we need to go.
Oh my God.
So 40 minutes with parking, because you have to physically park and then walk in.
Right.
So that was a whole thing. So my husband, after he woke up, he showered and he was like getting everything ready and packing. He was cleaning the house. And I was like, okay,
And
who
you're
cares?
like, can you do this more often after the baby comes?
Seriously. So it took me a while. I'd do a contraction, then I'd walk down the stairs. Then I'd have a contraction, then I'd walk to get to the garage, and then I'd have a contraction and I'd get in the car. And I'd be like, the last step is for me to get in the car, and you already have to be in the car because the second I get in the car, we are driving.
Yes, it needs to be running.
Yes. Because I was like, I was trying to have the least amount of contractions in the car. I had read so many birth stories about how people said it was so painful in the car and how horrible it was. So I was so afraid. So I remember we were pulling onto the highway. One weird thing that I did is when I passed the refrigerator, I was like, oh, I won't have time to make dinner tonight, so I have to freeze this meat. And to this
Oh my gosh.
And to this day, I was like, how did I ever remember? I was like, that is back in the day when I could remember things. So
oh my gosh.
So I was like, okay. So on the way to the hospital, we called the doctor and she's like, okay. She's like, you probably are coming in too early, but all right, that's fine.
Oh, come on.
So, and my contractions weren't that bad in the car. Now I had the seat almost, so I was laying down at that point. And then when we got to the hospital, my husband timed me. It took me 20 minutes to get from the car up to the room because every time I had a contraction, I would have to stop physically walking.
Yeah.
But I couldn't sit, and they kept trying to give me a wheelchair. So the whole time I was walking for 20 minutes, there was some guy with a wheelchair 2 paces behind us, like ready to catch me. And I kept being like, I'm fine. So, and my husband was really good. He was just like, all right, okay. So we get up there and all they said is like, you'll be fine. There's no registration. You just come in and you're all set. The first thing they had me do is they're like, okay, so you have all these forms to sign. I was like,
oh my gosh.
So I was just like, sign. And they're like, when do the contractions start? I was like, stop talking to me. I was like, let me see a doctor and then I can talk to whoever you want. So they have like a triage room in there and they check you. And so this woman comes in, she's like, okay, I need you to lie down on this bed. I'm like, oh no, I'm not doing that. And she's like, I have to see how far along you are. I'm like, I'm far enough along. Don't worry. I can stay. Don't worry. You can admit me. She's like, we still have to check you. And so my goal was to be between 5 and 6 centimeters when I got to the hospital. And I was 5 centimeters when she checked me. And she checked me and I jumped out of that bed. And I was like, I was not expecting the check to be that painful. And it was that painful.
It's so painful.
It's like they look to see when you're having a contraction. And, oh, now let's check.
Yeah,
and
right?
I was like, so you couldn't see my face, but that was me growling. So then I was like, great. I was like, in my birth plan, I have that the monitor for the baby is one of the ones so I can walk around. And they're like, yep, okay, let's get that together. So this nurse comes in, and I love all nurses, and they're great. This was not the nurse for me. This woman she told me she was 70-something years old. She had never seen a natural birth. And she was shocked that I was doing it.
Wow.
And she had no idea how to use those types of monitors so that I could walk around. So what happened is I had about a 3-foot radius that I could walk around in because I was tethered to a machine because they could not get it to work. And I made my husband get many other people to try and help this woman. And they had me switch rooms. Nothing.
Oh.
So we had gotten to the hospital like around 10 o'clock by the time I'd walked upstairs. And I was checked in and everything in our room by 11. And my water still had not broke. No mucus plug or anything like that had come out.
That's great.
So I was like, I'm doing well. I'm doing well. And they kept coming in and be like, we need to check you. I'm like, no, you're not checking me. I'm not. I'm able to talk to you, so I know where I am in labor, and I'm not at that point yet.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, my husband is like standing and walking with me. And by the way, this nurse eventually did leave, and I got another nurse. But at first, the two things that she did, and then my husband went out and got someone else because I was going to hurt this woman. She goes, oh, do you want to try a ball? And I was like, yes, that would be great. Maybe if I sit on a ball, like, and bounce on it.
Yeah.
She brought a ball in that wasn't even like one of those like yoga huge balls. I mean,
it was like a kid size.
It was like for a toddler. I was like, what is this? Like, this isn't even, I'm like, I can't even sit. I'm like, my knees will be so high up in the air. Like, do you know what the ball is for? I was like, oh my gosh. And this woman was like probably like 4'10" at most. So
she's like, it's great.
And
for
she's
me.
like, this is the biggest ball we have. I'm like, that's so not true. Just get it out of here. And then the next thing, she was like, you should try breathing differently. Why are you breathing like that? I go, are you a runner? And she goes, no, ma'am, I'm a certified nurse. And I go, okay, well, I am a runner, and this is how I do my breathing for running so that I don't lose my breath.
Yeah.
And I go, I know it's not conventional. I go, but this is what's working for me, and this is what's keeping my blood pressure down. And that was the point where my husband maybe just found us another nurse. And the nurse that came in, her name was Lauren. So that, and she was much more on it. It was just that nurse and I did not mesh well. So my husband at this point is walking with me a little bit, and all of a sudden everything happened at once. Like my mucus plug and my water broke all at the same time.
Oh my gosh. Now, were you standing? And
I was standing. Yes. And my husband was like, she's bleeding. I was like, no, that's normal. I was like, that's part of everything that comes out. And they were like, yep, that's fine. Yep, keep going. I hit transition at that point. Let me tell you. I knew right away at that next contraction. I was like, oh, this is why people get an epidural. So for all of you that had gotten an epidural, I understand. And all of you thinking about it, I 100% understand. But at that point, I was like, okay, I'm near the end. Like, I'll be fine. Like, I can do this.
And what time was this about? Do you remember?
So that was about 1:00.
Okay.
So I was like, okay. I'm like, well, I can do this for another hour and a half. And then, maybe push for like an hour or 2 hours, most 3 hours, hopefully. And I didn't even have to wait that long, so don't worry. I mean, I don't think I even went an hour.
Yeah.
And they were like, are you pushing standing up? I was like, I don't know. I was like, think of like the meanest, anytime they asked me a question, I was just rude. I was always rude. And I had my doctor and then a resident, and then like the head of the department was also there. And he never came in except for the very end after I had my child. And the resident was like really excited because she had never seen anyone do a natural birth, and she had never like seen it before. So she was really excited, and she was excited that we didn't know the sex of our baby. So she was like so excited. And I was like, okay. I'm like, you just need to stop. And so,
you know who you remind me of? Rachel from Friends. In the episode when she gives birth and all of these women are coming in and leaving. And she was like, listen, if one more person comes in and leaves before me.
I know. I was never nice. Every time they went to go check me, I was like, I don't need to be checked. I'll tell you when I'm pushing. Like, I understand the need to check, but it's not like I wasn't progressing.
Right.
So I also, in my birth plan, I had a weird thing where I did not want to be hooked up to an IV. I wanted to go as long as I could to not be hooked up to an IV. Now, if you imagine, if I had to have been hooked up to an IV, I would have been holding an IV pole in a 3-foot radius, trying to keep all these wires and things from not tripping.
That's kind of what I did.
Right. And I was like, I just can't do that. So they didn't give me an IV till they finally were like, get down. You are not standing up to push. And I was like, fine. So I got down to push, and that's when they gave me my IV.
They were like, we've strapped her down. Hurry up.
I know. So, the pushing part was hard. A lot of people are like, oh, I was so good at it. I was not good at it. But my nurse was a very good coach to push me to get to what I needed to do. So she really helped me a lot. That's when my nurse, I would say, it was crucial that I had this change in nurse because she really knew what I needed.
That's good.
So that was good. And then I pushed for about an hour, and then I knew he was coming at that point. So this was at 3:00 that I knew he was coming like very soon. And I remember I did one push, and I don't know what I did, but my entire body like flailed all over the place.
Oh my
and I
gosh.
don't know exactly what happened. It was like pain or how he must have like turned or something as I was pushing or something. And everyone was like, we're going to have to strap her legs down.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, no. And they were like, then you have to push without moving your legs. And so
now, were you having the back pain too? The back labor?
Like I didn't feel that pain anymore. So that was fine. That was just over with. So I finally, I don't know, I just gave like one final push and then he was out. He was born at 3:18.
Yeah.
And that was the big thing. And I remember the resident nurse, she was so excited to tell us. She's like, it's a boy. And I always ask my husband, I'm like, did you know it was a boy before they said it was a boy?
Right.
Because the other thing was on the way to the hospital was when we decided on our names. Not when I decided, rolling my eyes. That's me. You can't see them. My husband could finally come to a conclusion. If we had a girl, it was going to be this. If we had a boy, it was going to be this. So, she was really excited. And the other part that I was not aware of that was what was going to happen is the amount of stitching up I needed to have done, which was way worse than any of the labor. Because when most people get stitched up, they have some sort of medicine, like an epidural to numb them.
Right.
I did not have that. I had nothing.
They didn't do like a topical?
They tried a topical, but understand that you are very sore
It doesn't matter.
in the minutes afterwards. So I had my son on me for a few minutes, and then they cut the cord and they took him, and they had him on me, and they had to take him off because I was just screaming in so much pain. It was so painful while they were stitching me up, and it was just kind of hard for me because I just wanted to hold my son, and that's all I wanted to do. And it took them 45 minutes to do that whole process. So my husband was holding him, and eventually near the end they put the baby on me, and then it was just great. My mom was able to come in, and it was great because my husband did not tell my mom or my sister-in-law. She was also there, that what we had until they came in and met my son. And so that was fun. And it was just great. I mean, the only thing that I didn't appreciate was after, when you stay in the hospital or whatnot, we just had no time to ourselves. There was always someone coming in. I had a sign on the door. It didn't matter.
Right. The nurses are required to check you every, whatever the time interval is, 4 hours or something. So.
And they checked me way more than that.
Yeah.
Because I was on the 4-hour schedule, but my son was on, a 2-hour schedule.
Yeah.
And it was never the same. It wasn't like if they were coming in for me at 12 o'clock that they could come in at 12 o'clock and 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock. No, it was, we're coming in for you at 12 o'clock. Okay, well, we're going to come in for your son at 1 and 3.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So
we'll see him at 1 and 3, and then at 4 we're going to check you again.
Right. So it was just, that was not fun. But yeah, that was it. And he was great. And I remember that first night with him. They always tell you, you have to sleep. You have to sleep. You have to sleep. But I couldn't sleep.
Yeah.
I just held him. And I held him so much. I was just so happy. I really wanted a boy, and I was so happy he was here. And I was glad I didn't get the epidural. I was up walking 20 minutes after. And
that's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I was fine, and I felt great. So, I mean, it was just great. I was so happy. So
Good for you.
Yes. And this episode is going up right around his birthday.
Yeah,
His
happy
first birthday. I
birthday.
know. So, yes.
I can't believe it was a year ago.
I know. So, I'll post some pictures of the cake. I'm trying to make a little Mickey cake for him. So, won't be posting any pictures on him. I know. But, yeah, it'll be cute. So, that's about it for today.
Yeah.
That's my little birth story. If you guys have any questions, obviously, about Taryn's birth story or mine, we're definitely willing to share more stuff. Please understand that in order to keep this a clean rating, there's a lot of stuff we can't talk about.
Right.
So, yeah. So follow us on social media, and you can subscribe to the channel and give us some ratings. Ratings with words are more helpful if you can. So, yeah, that will do it for today's show. So thank you, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.